My next guest I had the privilege to sit down with is a Bangladeshi transmasculine queer Muslim. They are invested in advocating for the liberation of trans and gender expansive people of color through an abolitionist perspective. It was a really great episode. We talked a lot about transness in Bangladesh. We also discussed their journey from Bangladesh to the US. We also talked about discrimination, the difference between discrimination in South Asia and the US. We also talked about Islamophobia, and my guest gave some really great nuggets to folks who are Muslim and how to become more visible within the community. So I hope that you enjoy. Hello and welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his, and I will be your guide throughout this journey on the show. This show is a platform where trans men of color voices will be amplified as we share our stories. Trans men of color are not monolithic. What that means is our journeys are not the same. We come from different backgrounds. We have different stories, family relations, chosen family, and most of all, we have different transition journeys. Visibility equals possibility. I like to say that all the time. We like to highlight on this show trans men of color businesses and entrepreneurs, parents, athletes, survivors, and many other issues and topics that are relatable to trans men of color in our existence. Dem Bois Podcast is not only a platform to amplify our voices, but to raise awareness and conversation around our lived experiences. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting, listening, and sharing the show. Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. My next guest is a Bangladeshi transmasculine queer Muslim media maker. They're also a communication specialist, writer, organizer, and film curator. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean. It's a privilege to be here, and it's a pleasure meeting you.
Yes, definitely a pleasure to have you on the show. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to folks?
Yes. So my name is Mikail Khan. I go by pronouns they and he. He is relatively new, so I'm still getting used to it. I think for so long I've just been in the more gender non-conforming and non-binary spectrum, and I feel growing up in Bangladesh, where I grew up in for about 20 years of my life. I'm 33 years old now. In a place like Bangladesh, I think masculinity is a highly contested area, and just overall, like, people are, not as attuned to what healthy forms of masculinity can be in certain areas of the world, and also in the United States. So I think that's just a little bit about how, like, I came into my transmasculine self sort of in a very sort of contentious landscape, but then also embracing it over time that, like, I can be this way and not have to absorb whatever I had to endure while growing up in Bangladesh.
So the pronouns he, him are new to you. How does it feel using them now?
Yeah, so I think it had to do a lot with my medical transition. I started transitioning since 2018 onwards. I think I grew facial hair more so in mid-2019. So I think overall, yeah, I think the facial hair aspect and just how my voice deepened and how I started becoming comfortable in my voice and just having more speaking engagements here and there, I think that sort of informed how I came to embrace, again, a different type of masculinity, I would say. I still go by they in a lot of spaces, just because I want to make cisgender people uncomfortable at times. I know there are now a wide variety of pronouns, like Z, there, and so many others. And, I'd be very open to also trying out and adopting new pronouns in the future. But for now, it's they and he. And he feels nice and more comfortable now as I'm more further along in my transition journey.
I love that. That you're embracing that. And gender is fluid, right? We can shift and go across as many pronouns as we choose to use ourselves, right? So where are you located right now?
I'm located in the Bronx, New York. Actually, I've done my entire medical transition in this neighborhood. Strangely, like I've hopped around various places in New York, Brooklyn, Queens. I haven't lived in Staten Island yet, but yes, Brooklyn, Queens. I was living there in those neighborhoods between 2014 and 2018. But then I think once I shifted to the Bronx and started again my transition journey, I think overall this has just been my overall home for the last couple of years.
So do you prefer the Bronx? Is that like your favorite
Yes,
neighborhood
I
or what?
mean I I want to represent the Bronx in various circles.
Okay.
Because again, like this is one of the most underinvested neighborhoods in New York. Just because a lot of Black and brown people live here, and there's a lot of inequities here. But the neighborhood I live in is predominantly Black and Bangladeshi, so that's a really great mix for me to have and just surround myself with. One thing I do want to note is there's not that many trans visibility resources as much in the Bronx. There is Destination Tomorrow, which is run by the lovely Sean Coleman, but I think that's just one of the very few spaces in the South Bronx where queer and trans folks gather. So one thing that definitely I want to work towards in the coming years is to also just have more communions with trans, Black and brown trans people here. And that's just something I've noticed specifically. And that's why we see a lot of events cater to trans people happening in Brooklyn. So yeah, I do have to commute frequently to see my friends, but that's just something I want to change up because I think resources should exist in the Bronx. Like I just don't agree that just because like people are just surviving on a paycheck to paycheck basis here, like why can't queer and trans people also thrive here?
Mm. You know, it's funny that you say that. Not funny, but it's coincidence that you say that because a lot of requests for Dem Bois services, I get a lot of requests from the Bronx. Even
Oh,
yeah, and I always wonder, like, what is that about? Like, is it because folks are telling folks about it? Like, predominantly from the Bronx. But I would like to say, if there is nothing that's available, sometimes it's not available because it's meant for you to create. So that's just a
yes.
food for thought, right? It's like, hey, it's not available. I wish more trans folks had these things and resources. Hey, maybe it's just waiting for you to create them. So I'm just gonna put that out there for you.
Yes, for sure. Like there are definitely more Black and brown trans people in the Bronx, and I'm sure that's who you're receiving requests from. And yeah, like I think definitely Brooklyn is like a central haven for queer, trans, intersex folks together, but that's just something. Again, us Bronx folks, we're like no to Brooklyn. We want to say no to Brooklyn a lot of the
So
times.
is that a battle like Bronx versus Brooklyn type of thing? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes call my friends Brooklyn supremacists because I want them to come here to hang out, but then they're always still. I mean, there are fun events in
Mhm.
Brooklyn all the time. Like every night, you will see something, and it's just not happening too much in the Bronx.
Gotcha. So let's create those spaces for
Mhm.
anybody that's listening that's in the Bronx too, like that's from the Bronx or in the Bronx currently. Like if it's not something there for you, let's create them, right? So we don't have to
Exactly.
travel far to uh build community in our own, we can build community in our own neighborhoods. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Exactly.
So how did your name choose you?
Funny question. So I chose my name in 2020. I was going by my legal name for the longest time, and mind you, my legal name is also gender neutral. Mikail is a more masculine name, and I chose it primarily because when I was growing up in Bangladesh, I had a really good Muslim friend who was a girl, and her brother was one of the elderly, like masculine figures that I really respected and admired. And he was just such a lovely human being in terms of just how he provided support for his family and his sister, which was my friend, and also to me and many others. And I think his name just stuck with me. His name was also Mikail. So I think that was just a name that stuck with me. And I wanted a Muslim name specifically. And Mikail is the or in Christianity, it's Michael. So it's like the archangel of God or Allah. So, and I know it's sort of an uncommon name in a lot of Muslim circles. You will hear the name Mikhail, which is in sort of the Russian counterpart to that. But I feel in the Muslim circles, Mikhail is just not a very common name. And yeah, overall, like I just wanted something that resonated, maybe a figure that resonated with my childhood, and then also wanting it to connect to God themselves. So that's how my name came into being.
I love that. So does your friend's brother know that you chose that name?
So yeah, I mean, because I'm trans mask, it's been hard to maintain relationships with a lot of Muslim people in Bangladesh. They are both that friend and the brother Mikhail, they're in a very, very Muslim family. And while I was accepted as queer when I was still going to their house, I think it was a little difficult for them to accept me as a transmasculine individual. And obviously it's very sad, but I feel like I also want to meet people where they're at if they're not ready to also have that open dialogue with me at this stage in their life. I respect that and honor that. So yeah, overall, I haven't been as much in touch with Mikhail Bhaiya. Yes.
That would be lovely for the person to know that the way that they walk in the world inspires
Mhm.
someone else to name themselves after them. It's unfortunate, and just as long
Yeah,
as you know and you say that they're not ready and you are okay with where they're at, and hopefully one day they will be ready and so that they can receive that.
I
That's a
agree.
yeah. So let's quick geography lesson though, because you said Bangladesh. For folks that are listening that don't know exactly where Bangladesh is, you mind giving us a quick geography lesson of where that's located?
So Bangladesh is, I mean, geopolitically or on the map, it's basically under India. It's sort of like a triangle or a half. I mean, it's a mixture of many shapes, but it is a triangle and it sort of encompasses the Bay of Bengal, which is the big ocean surrounding the region. And the country was formed in 1971. We were actually under occupation, as one would call it, by East Pakistan back then, prior to 1971. And my parents, and basically all of my elderly family members, they are products of the war that took place in 1971. So, um, and some would even label what happened in Bangladesh as one of the biggest genocidal wars that happened back then because it was again very unfathomable what folks had to endure during the 1971 liberation war. So that's a little bit of the history of Bangladesh, how that came into being. It's a relatively new country. I guess it's been more than 40 years. And yeah, I guess myself and people of my age, like I would say millennials were the first people who came out from an independent Bangladesh. So yeah, I mean, in terms of just where the country is, I would say there has been a lot of strife. And I think that's what also hindered the progression of the LGBTQ plus movement. Um, I believe, 16 or 17 when the movement started to come out of the shadows. It was predominantly cis gay men and trans people. And when I say trans people, I just only mean trans women and trans men. There's no in between because, again, there's safety in the binary in a place that's also, I would say, I don't want to use the word conservative, but yes, I mean, there's a lot of repressive forces at play in our social environment. So I knew from a very young age, from maybe 6 or 7 years old, that I was just not a woman. And there was no vocabulary back then for me to access in a place like Bangladesh, where I only spoke Bangla at that time. I only cultivated better English speaking skills after I came to the United States, which was in 2010. So yeah, I mean, while I was growing up, there were no Bangla terminologies for trans, let alone transmasculine or trans women. We have hijra cultures, as some people are familiar with, but that doesn't get into the roots of what trans womanhood is or trans manhood is. And I just knew that I had to keep quiet about who I was in Bangladesh. Like there was no space for to have a dialogue. And I think one time I did tell my father that, oh, I don't I don't identify as a woman. And he just said to keep this thought in yourself and bury it deep and not to utter it out loud in any environment because this is just not acceptable. So I think I just took his cue at that time because again, I was only 8 years old. Anyway, I give this back a story to just contextualize where Bangladesh was at when I was growing up as like a basically an adolescent at that stage.
Thank you for that because I actually did not know that. So you actually educated me a little bit too. So I didn't know about when it was formed and the year that it was formed, and it's relatively young country.
Mhm.
So that would lead me to, I mean, you started to talk about it a little bit more, but like my question to you is like, where did your transition journey begin? And you said 8. So it's from, I guess your journey started in Bangladesh and now into the US, right? So how did your journey go from beginning until now?
Yeah, so at 8 years old, as I mentioned, I think I felt comfortable telling my father, who was a masculine person, that oh, I'm not a woman. And I think the first reaction I got was to just keep this truth buried in me. But the funny thing is, my father knew I was masculine. And even like my mother back then, she knew that, oh, I wasn't really feminine. Like I had very short hair. I would play cricket. Cricket is like one of the South Asian sports I grew up on. I wanted to be a cricketer. I was practicing really hard to be a fast bowler and a batsman. And I was playing with the boys in the cricket team. I was the only girl playing with the boys in the cricket team. It really kind of weirded out the teachers there and some of my other girl classmates that, oh, why am I pretending or not pretending? To them, it was pretense, but for me, it was my reality. So in a place like Bangladesh, schools also want us to wear uniforms. So we can't wear casual clothing to school. So as part of the girls' school or the girls' clothing, I did have to wear a skirt and like a tucked-in shirt, and it had the school's logo on it. So I remember it was just like really weird for me to wear that skirt, and I was just every day I was sort of mortified to wear that to some degree. And then obviously uh, puberty hit, I was having my period, everything. So it was overall a very confusing time for me because I didn't understand what was happening physically, changes to my body and everything. And I also didn't feel comfortable sharing my confusion with my fellow classmates. I mean, even though they also sense that I'm masculine and I didn't feel comfortable being in the girls' room with them. So I would get bullied a lot, for lack of a better term. I would get bullied a lot just because of my more masculine appearance and overall just not subscribing to, again, traditional feminine behaviors. Uh, and then, yeah, I just remember those years being very foggy till I was hitting 8, 16, 17, till I started to realize, oh, there is something it's really like strange, but also permanent. There's a permanency in me about what I'm feeling and what I'm breathing in. So, and I remember again learning a little bit about the LGBTQ plus movement at that time, and then connecting with some gay men about just what is going on and can I slowly start being a part of it. At that time, again, I because trans wasn't in the picture, or trans man, I just thought I was a butch lesbian. And I'm sure that's been the journey for a lot of transmasculine individuals. And and again, to the gay men that were leading the movement, to them, I was again a lesbian who would work with them on various issues. And they liked it that there's like some diversity happening. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I think then I started, I know the last years of my high school were also very, a little traumatic because I liked a woman or a girl back then, and it just didn't work out. And then everyone knew that I was not a quote unquote heterosexual. So everyone, a lot of people in my school started to know. And it was humiliating for me at that stage because I was the only kid in a school of like, it felt like I was the only kid that, again, I'm sure were others, but they didn't kind of come out of the woodworks in the way I did because I guess I just couldn't contain my, again, desires back then, but also my gender expression. It all sort of started unfolding in a very magnificent, I would say, manner. Yeah, then I applied to some scholarships and I got into college in the United States. It's a women's college in Pennsylvania. So I think that's when I started to, and I think, leaving the Bangladesh, I think started some more questioning and interrogation on my part that, oh, like, why am I the way I am? And what can I do to alleviate some of the pain that I'm experiencing and have been holding for so long? So overall, like coming to the women's college, and as you know, a lot of women's colleges, there are a lot of peers on campus. So I think that helped me build community. And there are also like 3 or 4 trans men around. So I think during my 3rd year in college, I started realizing that I am transmasculine.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Dem Bois Inc. I am also the host of Dem Bois Podcast. As you may know, Dem Bois provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender-affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender-affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@dembois.org. That is HELLO@DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode. So you said at 8 years old, you came out to your father. What made you want to tell your father versus telling your mother? Like what was that stood out for you to tell your father first?
I think it's because, again, we shared similar. I mean, I don't want to say at all that my father and I are very similar. In fact, like we're very, very different. I just felt that he was the most salient and most prominent masculine figure in my life. So I wanted to tell him because he was just always there. And another part of the dynamics in my family was that my mother was the primary income earner in the family, and my father, he did dermatology, and dermatology isn't like a robust profession in Dhaka, but he had very like, I would say, freelance hours during the day. So I felt he was more at home than my mother was. So I think that also contributed to me telling my father because, again, his omnipresence was always there.
So when you finally, I don't know, maybe your dad said, hey, this is what's happening with our child, or did you go tell your mother and say, hey, mom, this is how I'm feeling? How did that go with your mother?
So with my mother, I remember I told her I didn't tell her about the gender identity because I think I took my father's advice in very seriously back when I was 8 years old to not tell anyone. And this included my mother, then my elder sister, anyone, any aunt or uncle. But I knew that I liked women also, or girls back in school. I remember telling my mother that I liked a girl, and she didn't really have a reaction to that as much. And this was when I was about 17 years old. So she didn't have much of a reaction to that. She was more so just focused on she told me to just focus on my studies and to see whether I can live outside Bangladesh. I think she didn't really have a direct dialogue with me about this, whether it's something to be open about. She just said to focus on my education because because I think for Bangladeshis, for a lot of us, because our parents went through the war. I mean, one thing good about my family is they see education as the upliftment of our society and also just where we were at that stage because we were also living in a very low income neighborhood in Dhaka. So to them, that is what the ultimate mode of success is. And then what I do with that education later, that's up to me. And that is my independent decision.
Very interesting. I'm wondering, like, if you told your parents, you told your mother, and your mother said, just focus on your education, was that kind of a way? I know obviously you can't reach your mother's mind, right? But you think that was a way to be like, hey, just keep that under wraps for now, get your education, get out of Bangladesh, and do whatever it is that you want to do for yourself? Do you think that was like a pass?
Yes, I think that's what she was implying. And what you just said about that, I think her goal is more so that you have to, because again, I was a woman or a girl in her eyes, and any girl in Bangladesh, in order for that person to live independently, education and just employment opportunities is what will get you out of, again, the low income or the poverty that we were surrounding ourselves with. So I think that was the overall goal for my parents back then. Yeah, and I would say again with the college, definitely college was a space for me to explore both my gender identity and sexuality. But I think I've always felt again the sort of conflict as to why I wasn't able to do this while growing up. Because again, that is my home in Bangladesh. I still went there a few times here and there, and I was openly more queer. But I will say on this episode that since 2018, since my medical transition, I haven't been back in Bangladesh because I think there still needs to be some repair work done between myself and my father. My mother still passed away back in 2015. So now it's just me and my father. We have to do some repair work in order for me to go back to my home country and just visit again.
Sorry to hear that about your mother. But I'm also glad to hear that you're aware that, hey, there needs to be some repair in our relationship before I go there and put myself in a predicament that is not healthy for me or my mental health. So I love that. You didn't say mental health, but I'm assuming, right? That's connected,
Yes,
right?
yes. Because I think one thing that I'm sure many trans masculine people or trans women and just people, I believe, who've at least gone through some medical transition has gone through, um, is that I think a lot of families may accept queerness or some types of a little bit of gender nonconformity because I think it's something that they don't have to see 24/7. But I think when you're medically transitioned, if you have a different physical outlook or just appearance, it's really hard for any parent to come to terms with that. And I think that's been the case for not just Bangladeshi parents, but I've seen that all around. And that's where we'll eventually get to talk about visibility. That's where I think visibility can sometimes be a knife that cuts both ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you mind if I read your bio really quickly?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna read a piece of it. But one of the things that sticks out to me, and then you said about visibility. So I think that this connects with visibility. But it says Mikail is invested in advocating for the liberation of trans and gender expansive people of color through an abolitionist perspective. Their creative pursuits are driven by interrogations on gender, queerness, geography, and religion, and they organize with a few NYC-based grassroots groups to counter Brahminism, Islamophobia, and white supremacy. For one, I love that. All of it. And it's a lot to unpack in that.
Mhm.
Would you like to discuss it in any part that you want to start with?
Yes. So, I mean, I think I'll start with the concept of abolition to some degree, especially when it's applied to Bangladesh's LGBTQ movement or South Asia's just trans movements in general. Because I mean, as you might be aware, that a lot of the countries outside the US, and we need to also kind of, and given what's also happening with Palestine and Congo and everything, like I think we also need to unpack or decolonize our ideas of what it means to live in the Western world and as a trans person, and then what it is in places like Africa or Asia and even South America, where visibility as a trans person, that concept came from the United States and European countries specifically, because the United States and the and this is where the United States is currently failing, because they've been calling themselves, or the United States, the territory, unceded lands of indigenous people, they've been calling themselves the beacons of progress. This is the land where progress ultimately needs to reside in. But when it comes to Palestine, or when it comes to genocide happening, or even atrocities happening against trans women or trans men in different regions, they they don't have as much to weigh in on, because it kind of contradicts their position that they are the beacons of progress. Whenever a trans person or LGBT person gets attacked, that's when the US will step in and say, oh, come to our country, get asylum, seek a better life. And that's something I've noticed. And obviously, for survival, a lot of queer Bangladeshis, they've migrated out and gotten asylum, because there have been some murders that happened in 2016 in Bangladesh that has prompted, again, a large influx of queer and sometimes trans Bangladeshis who got into the asylum process. And that's what the US and these Western progressive nations have marketed themselves as that, oh, we're going to, again, save you from the barbarity of Muslim countries, where, but I don't think it's barbarity. I just think it's underinvested, under-resourced. It's been ravaged through war and various acts of ethnic cleansing. So, and how does that impact then a trans person, then a living there? So I think that's where I want to talk about abolition, because I think, for us to divest from these systems, we need to also realize that, oh, every day, what acts of resistance can we do? Whether it's like walking out of the workplace, or doing this mutual aid project, or stuff like that. So I think when it comes to the Bangladesh's LGBTQ movement, I've been noticing that there has been a lot of mutual aid going on, because we cannot rely on the Bangladesh government or the US forces to carry and cultivate life within that community. So that's where I do think abolition plays a role in how communities are feeding and fending for each other. But then sometimes also abolition is not being applied, because there is this tendency in a lot of South Asian countries, and especially Muslim countries, to look toward the police to make arrests whenever a trans person or LGBT person gets murdered. And I understand the rationale. And I don't think we've created systems to think beyond the police, but we're still in that phase. Most of India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, like most of these countries, there's always this need to file a report in the police station and get justice through the criminal court system. But again, I don't know if these singular acts of filing for court cases against perpetrators or murders is really bringing the real material justice and the resources that the community needs. So So I think that's a little bit of my framing of abolition and how it's applied, and what we also might need to do to get there in places outside the US.
You mentioned that I had kind of made a face a little bit because you mentioned, well, no one can see me, but you can. But you mentioned that the U.S. is supposed to be this beacon for safety, right? We're
Mhm.
supposed to be we're supposed to set this sort of an example for everybody else to follow. Do you feel, I mean, residing once in Bangladesh and now here, do you feel like the U.S. lived up to what is expected of them from outside places, as far as protection for trans folks and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, again, I will say I live in a bubble, which is New York City. New York City is its own bubble. Yeah, I live in the Bronx, which is underinvested, but it's still a bubble. And there's so many other states in the United States now facing anti-trans bills. Now they're going to target trans adults. That's what I'm hearing in the news. Um, I think my perception is a little skewed, and I don't know if I'm the right person to talk about whether US has lived up to its expectations, because I sincerely believe I live in a little bit of a bubble. Whereas, I've seen two extremes living in Bangladesh where there's no rights or legal recognition of trans men. There's been legal recognition of trans women, but trans men are a very invisibilized subset of the larger gender minority population. This is because trans men, they want to meld in to the larger cis hetero society and not bring attention to themselves. So, I mean, primarily for me, I want it to be visible because I don't see any political conviction really coming out of the transmasculine uh, Bangladeshis as much. And so it was important for me to kind of, I wouldn't say come out of the shadows, but sort of just be out there. And while I'm living here in New York, I do see myself as a diasporic solidarity activist to some degree. And it's important for me to also be honest about my story, that there wasn't room for me as a trans masculine person in Bangladesh to access hormones, access medical facilities back even in 2015 or 2016. Only in the last 2 years have we only gotten like one or two endocrinologists to kind of attend to trans masculine people.
Why do you think that is that trans women get more of a priority over trans men?
That is I mean, there's so many ways this question can be answered, but I do think it's society's kind of fixation on the hyper visibility and the hypersexualization of trans women. I've seen that happen not just in the US, it's even more so in places where trans women can stick out more in public. And it's really terrible of how, the visibility component also puts trans women at a lot of risk. And the primary, again, modes of employment in Bangladesh, in India, and various places for trans men are begging and sex work. And that is still ongoing that's been ongoing for the last century more for India, but again, last 40 years, that's what I've been seeing. And that's the primary way that even my parents or people, they recognize trans people as beggars or sex workers in a society like Bangladesh. So, and with trans men, some of them might be engaged in sex work, but I think again, they've tried to meld in and sort of just do odd jobs, whether it's like different stores. I've seen some trans masculine people just like trying to just blend in the crowd, and even like sometimes without hormones, they can still blend in.
I don't know how to ask this question, but in a way, how does masculinity tie into visibility with trans women, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking about specifically cis men and their needs of trans women, I do think there is, again, when I talk about society, I do think it's cis men's fascination with trans women. Again, there was that terrible phrasing that was happening back then, trans attracted, like cis men, um, that again has lured trans women into the sex work industry, and again, not creating spaces for rights and legal recognition. One thing that, again, a lot of our governments in South Asia do, and including Bangladesh, is the government wants to give money to transgender people, like just like these money in terms of just like a 3-month money scheme to fund your education, or a 3-month money scheme to buy food. But money eventually goes away. What the community needs is, again, and this is where I understand what my mother was saying about education as the rite of passage for, like, if you are, I mean, not to say that she understood that, oh, I would take this transmasculine route. But again, it is the rite of passage to attain a better life for yourself. And that's just something that's not easily granted to a lot of trans people.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Dem Bois Podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. Pay our guests an honorarium? Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. So if your mother could see you now, do you think your mother would be proud of where you are in life now?
I think both my mother and father are somewhat proud of me to some degree. I haven't as much talked to my father. We currently just mostly email one another, but he knows that, oh, again, to them, I made it in New York. So to some degree, like working in various, I mean, they don't even know half the work I do. They just know that, oh, I'm salaried, I have a home, and etc. To them, it's I made it in New York, and it was their dream of seeing like one of their kids just staying here in the United States. And yeah, I do think they are proud of me. I was always a problem child. But I think because I've overcome various struggles, and they saw it with their own eyes, that both my sexual orientation, gender identity, and then other issues that were happening even within the LGBTQ community that they were aware of, that was also impacting me on a personal level. So yeah, I really hope my mother is proud from the heavens above.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about discrimination. So do you see a difference in the discrimination in Bangladesh versus discrimination here in the U.S.?
Oh, of course. I mean, here I think discrimination, I would say it happens, but it sometimes happens passively. It's sort of like people don't really as much come up to you directly to confront an issue, whereas I think it's more, it's a little more volatile, I would say, in a place like Bangladesh, especially for trans people. But however, if you're flying under the cover and there's no scrutiny happening, I think you can do a lot of things in Bangladesh, because again, it is a very populated country and you can just get lost there. And I think there's a difference between sexuality and gender. Two men or two women holding hands in Bangladesh, it's not going to yield any criticism or any attention in Bangladesh, because I think we're used to intimacy in that way, like between friends, or like it's just more blurred. Whereas here, I think if, let's say you see two cis women holding hands, and in a maybe a different state, like a more regressive state, I think you will get more criticism on that front.
So before we started recording, we were talking about visibility, and you asked me a question as if you were the first Muslim guest on the show. Now, I don't know the answer to that because I can't remember. But I want to say that you are, so I'm going to grant you that you are.
Okay.
So, but I want to ask you about visibility when we talked about more Muslim folks being visibly trans. And so you want to talk about that a little more about like what is it and why more Muslim folks aren't visible?
I think it's also part of the organizing work I do and sort of trying to be visible as a transmasculine Muslim person, organizing in South Asian circles and more POC circles. Because one thing that queer and trans Muslims have to do is we have to defend both Islam. We also have to defend both queerness and transness, because we see now global Islamophobia has just been skyrocketing throughout. I mean, the US constantly sees it. And again, it's obviously manufactured by the US and European nations, this idea around Islamophobia, and then how Muslim countries need to, again, we're seeing what's happening in Palestine. We're also seeing what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and the wars that are happening. It's not just about resources. I think there is a specific targeting for the ethnic cleansing of Muslims in different countries. So, I mean, that's the fine line that I constantly have to navigate. But I feel I'm one of the few trans Muslims who are navigating that, because in Bangladesh, most transgender people, even though they're from Muslim families, they don't want to be associated with Islam. And that is, I understand that, because there is a lot of trauma that has happened because Islam has been used by the government. Islam has been used culturally to again, breed oppression and violence against a lot of trans people. So I understand their reasonings too. But I think in the larger picture, for me, it is important to root out internalized Islamophobia and come together and own ourselves as trans and queer Muslims in the larger political landscape.
So when you say owning yourselves, what do you mean specifically by that?
I would say like forming community around queerness, transness, and Muslimness. Ramadan happens every year. It's the time when Muslims fast, and there are only a very few queer and trans Muslims who do come together to fast. And New York is actually a good city to be queer, trans, and Muslim, because there's a lot of us here. And I think, but in Bangladesh, you wouldn't as much see the community aspect, because again, the hurt and the betrayal is there in a lot of people's hearts about how Islam is being used by the government to shun trans queer Muslims. So I think for me personally, I want to create a different theology, or more liberatory theology around how Islam can be, because Islam is, to me, is sort of a tree and we sit under its shade. So, and that's where we also need to come together and realize that we are part of Allah's creations, and there are various stories in the Quran that do talk about gender variance. I can't really speak off the top of my head, but there are our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he specifically talks about, like, he never denounced transgender Muslims or gender identity in that way. And I think that's the miscommunication that's been going on for a number of years. And I'm not saying for trans Muslims to, do 5 times prayer per day. I'm just saying that have a little bit of faith that you can reorient your relationship to Islam and even merge it with other theologies too. Like I also really deeply believe in Buddhism in various aspects. So for me, like I just think there are various interpretations of Islam that queer and trans Muslims could be open to and apply it to their everyday lives.
So I want to ask you this for somebody that's listening, do you have any advice? Maybe they're listening to you and they're in Bangladesh, or maybe they're listening to you and they're in another state, and they're Muslim. What would be your advice for them to be more visible or to gain their courage to be visible?
I would say courage and community. I mean, these are very interpersonal and relational skills and development that occur over time. I know at times it may be isolating. It can be deeply isolating for a lot of trans Muslims coming into themselves and trying to even reconcile their relationship with Islam and their Muslim families and their overall journey with transness. I just want to again tell any audience members, especially if you are younger or even older and just coming into your transness and Muslimness, that there is a community out there for you. There are resources such as Queer Crescent, Masjid, MASGD. There's various community organizations that are hosting a lot of virtual events for you. And especially if you're also living in Bangladesh, I do think exhausting all the options you have, whether it's virtual or just even putting an anonymous call out to like bring in community into whether it's your space or more public space, I think people definitely crave community. And I definitely don't think we're alone. There's so many queer and trans Muslims that I've seen booming in the last couple of years. And yeah, I just only think the best is yet to come for someone who's navigating a lot at this stage. And I don't want to be cheesy or say it gets better, but it sometimes may seem really difficult. But again, like any of the resources you have and just online resources and just other community buildings and relational skills you can develop, I think those are really critical in bringing forward the light in you.
I love that. Thank you so much. So I want to ask you a quick question about your mental health. So during this time, how did you navigate your mental health moving from Bangladesh and obviously coming here without family, right? And how were you able to reconcile with your mental health and readjust into college life and transitioning to your queerness, like all of these things? How did you take care of your mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I think mental health, again, a very taboo topic in Bangladesh. I wouldn't say it's taboo right now as much. There are more centers and even psychologists that I see popping up here and there when I speak to other family members. But I think growing up, the fact that I have to take care of my internal self, that was just non-existent. And I think I was on autopilot for most of the time because I knew that I had to survive through a lot of the growing up stages from middle school to high school, knowing full well that I was very different from my peers. And there was also no language in Bangla to talk about what I was going through. And when I came to the United States, I remember again just going into therapy for the first time when I was in my third year. It didn't feel as affirming. I think I'm looking for a specific set of qualities in a therapist, which is again trauma affirming or just or trauma informed, and just overall seeking another queer trans POC and just having a diverse lived experience. And I think I'm also searching for someone with an international experience. So I think that overall, like I was shopping with a couple of therapists the first a few years after college. And I think since 2016, I've just been going to one therapist who I felt was very similar to sort of some of my lived experiences, but then also very different. And he, that's what informed my textured approach with this person, uh, where the person would challenge me and very limiting self beliefs I held about myself, and just overall how I can overcome these negative self deprecating thoughts, right? That I grew up with throughout much of my life. So I think overall my mental health did improve significantly in the last few years, and more so. I wouldn't say medical transition is the end all be all, I think, but coming into this self has allowed me to further express myself, and overall just understand that my interiority is precious and I do need to take care of myself to even show up for others in a like a concrete manner.
Oh, I love that. You said a few things that I really like. One, that transitioning is not an end all be all, and you shopped around for your therapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of that is golden. I think it's very important. If you are going to take care of your mental health, you have to trust in the person that's helping you navigate that. And so you can't, sometimes you're not lucky enough to find that first person. You might go on a session with that one person, say, you know what, this person is not for me. Just like you said, keep shopping around, right? It's just the same as buying an outfit. You're not going to just buy the first outfit you pick out in the store. Maybe you're lucky and you get that nice little shirt that fits you well and it's like, okay, this is going to go good with my shoes. But most of the time, what you go to several different stores, you try on different shirts to like, okay, this is the one. Therapy is the same way, really, right? And I like to think of transitioning not being end all be all because it's not the solution to all of your problems.
Exactly. And I think that's the sometimes um, the stereotype that gets created amongst a lot of I only want to speak for trans masculine people.
Mm.
But that, like being a gym bro or like going
Yeah,
doing this, I think those overall boost your mental health. But I think some of the deep-seated trauma work that we also need to unravel and just make sense of it all. I think that's also critical in understanding that, again, like, do you want the same oppression to be wielded on the next generation, or do you want to stop it, or sort of stop the line right there and then? And I would say I'm not, I mean, have a lot to still go through in therapy. I still struggle immensely in understanding various aspects of my childhood. A lot of my memories are foggy. So again, I definitely have progressed a lot, but I want to also shout out that the struggle is still real and we're all going through it.
absolutely. And there's no such thing as a healed person. We are constantly healing, right? As long as we keep living, we constantly growing and learning new things about ourselves and healing the old parts of ourselves. And I think that I must just speak for me, right? I don't know how other people feel about this, but I feel like I want to be a whole person. So that means physically whole, mentally whole, and just minding what I put in my body. So what I eat, right? Being
Mhm.
physically active. Exercise and going to the gym is not for everyone. But hey, I'm going on a brisk walk, every once a week, or I'm going on a hike or whatever, right? It's like taking care of yourself in ways that makes you a whole person, whatever that means for you individually. So
Mhm.
know that transitioning, or a lot of folks say, I just want to get top surgery, I want to do top surgery and that's going to fix
Yes.
it. That's not always the answer, right? So
No, and sometimes it actually brings back some trauma you might have held deep in your body. And I've seen that also happen, like a reaction 2 months after top surgery. And and that is part of the joy that comes with it. But then the person started questioning that, oh, the joy is transitory. I have to deal with the pain as well.
absolutely, absolutely. And post-op depression is real, and so we don't talk about
Exactly.
that enough as transmasculine folks either.
Mhm.
So this is the part of the show where I like to ask a guest a random question. I have a list of questions that's continuously growing. And the questions may or may not have anything to do with what we talked about today. So just pick a number between 1 and 37, and I'll read that question off to you.
All right. Wild card. I'll pick 17.
Okay, number 17 says, what was the one thing someone told you prior to transitioning that once you transitioned, you realized was false?
Oh, okay. I mean, it's funny. It's like one of my family members. They were like, "Oh, you're gonna get cancer if you start taking hormones."
Whoa.
So, and I didn't know what to say, but I knew that clearly this was false information this person was presenting, and I then talked to my primary care provider. So overall, no, I don't have cancer. I just want to tell this person that. So, so I think that's one of the misconceptions, and I think it's again fed by our medical industrial complex that's very not trans affirming when it's not specifically an LGBT community setting.
Right. Wow, I've never heard that one before.
Oh yeah, I mean in South Asian circles, oh if you do this, you're gonna get diabetes, or if you do this, you're gonna get cancer. These are the two extremes, and I don't know which one's gonna happen to me just yet.
Well, so far you good, right?
Yes.
So is there any last words that you want to say or any bit of advice that you would like to give someone that's listening?
Last bit of advice or words. I would say definitely for trans Muslim people, other trans Bangladeshis to or South Asian people, definitely come through to this podcast or even submit a form. I definitely want to hear from you or just see more visibility on that spectrum. And definitely just keep like doing the work on yourself while also working for the larger community, whether it's combating the various forces, whether it's in South Asia or the United States. I think both are important. The struggle is ongoing, and we need to come together to battle the fascists that are trying to curb our existence at this stage.
Yes, absolutely. Because visibility equals possibility.
Exactly.
Yes. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I really, really appreciate you.
My pleasure, Sean. It was lovely being here.
So we have reached the end of this episode. I want to say thank you for listening to Dem Bois Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. Be sure to visit our website at dembois.org. That is DEMBOIS.org. If you would like to connect with us, be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook. If you think you would be a great guest on the show, or if you know somebody you think would be a great guest on the show, there's multiple ways to request to be a guest on the show. First is you can go visit our Instagram page, click the link in our bio, and from there you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Or you can visit our website, click the programs tab up top, scroll down to podcast, click the podcast button, and from there on the podcast page, you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Yo, we need questions, y'all. If you have those burning questions, a question that you want to ask me or a future guest on the show, there's multiple ways that you can send in questions, right? So first, you can go to Instagram, DM us that question, or you can email us at hello@dembois.org. That's HELLO, like hi, at dembois.org. Be sure to like the show. Be sure to share this show out with your friends and other folks in your networks. So until next time, take care.